All right. I'd like to start off by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rachah Kodash. And a strong salutation, all right, to the elect out there, you brothers that's out there striving, for this truth and honesty, sincerity to the best of your ability, in the hopes of being the elect. Today's lesson is going to be called The Beast. And we're speaking about the beast in the book of Revelation. And Lord's will, we're going to go into it and give it some understanding, edification, and basically the understanding of what is the beast, because people talk about the mark of the beast, they talk about beast, they talk about the Antichrist, they talk about this and talk about the other, and most people don't know what it means when it speaks about the beast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here, and what you're seeing is a drawing that was created. I'm not sure if this was that one, the one brother that had fell out, because he was doing a lot of these camp signs. I'm not sure if this was him or if it was someone else that drew this, but it was one of the brothers from Great Millstone, I believe, that put this together. Maybe they got some of it off, offline, and they just copy and paste, But what you're looking at here is the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Is natal. The 7 heads equal 7 governments or kingdoms ruled by Esau. And you see here, the beast, all right, it's a dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns. And then you have a woman that's riding on top of the beast. And that woman is representative of America. And these beasts, especially the 10 horns and the 7 heads, are all European nations that were allied with the ancient Roman Empire, and today they're allied with America, because America is the revival of the ancient Roman Empire, including NATO and the EU. And I want to go through it and break certain things down, because when you go to the actual writing of it in the book of Revelation, the Apostle John, he actually saw an actual beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns, and it was actually red and all of that. He saw the crowns, he saw everything. He saw an actual woman riding on top of the beast, but he didn't understand what was meant by it, because at that time it wasn't necessary for that mystery to be revealed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here to the book of Psalms 49 and 3. It says, "My mouth shall speak of wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall be of understanding. I will incline mine ear to a parable. I will open my dark sayings upon a harp." Because a lot of, you could say that a lot of things in the scriptures are dark sayings. You have some things that are plain. Sometimes it speaks about a tree, it's talking about an actual tree. Sometimes it speaks about a mountain or a hill, it's talking about actual mountains and hills. Sometimes it speaks about water, it's actually talking about different bodies of water. But sometimes it's representative of something else. And there are keys in the scriptures to point towards what these things mean, but the Bible in itself is a puzzle that has to be put together. First of all, the person that's putting the puzzle together and instructing of how to put the puzzle together has to be inspired by Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. All right, so now let's go to the word parable. H4912, mashal, proverb, parable, proverb for proverbial saying, aphorism. So you have proverbial sayings in the Bible that are symbolically speaking about something else. Like when Yahweh Shai used to speak in parables, he would use certain symbology to speak about certain situations or certain individuals as to um, what they were, or that particular individual represented such and such. Like if he spoke about the 10 virgins, that represented five, the two extremes of this knowledge, the ones that take heed and are anointed and have the oil, and the ones that don't take heed and don't have the oil, certain things of that nature. And then next to that was a word called aphorism, which I looked it up. It says a pithy observation that contains a general truth, such as if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So when you read the scriptures sometimes are parabolic. Sometimes it's a similitude or an allegory to something or another. And go back, it says, and I will open my dark sayings upon the harp. Now let's go to dark sayings. H2420, chayada, riddle, difficult question, parable, enigmatic saying or question, perplexing saying or question, a riddle, dark, obscure utterance, riddle, enigma, to be guessed, perplexing questions, difficult, double dealing with having. So the men of the Lord always used riddles and parables and proverbs, to tell certain stories. Jake still do it to this day. When you go back during the time of Samson had a riddle that he told the Philistines, and his woman messed with him so bad and nagged him so much that he told her what the answer to the riddle. And she went back and told him, but they didn't know what the riddle was about. So, and Yahushua, when he came on the scene, all he did pretty much was speaking riddles, and dark sayings and parables, except for when he spoke to his disciples, he told them straight up, because they were the ones that were going to carry the light, and they had to understand what they were doing or teaching, so that they can teach others and make them understand, the ones that are part of the elect. So now let's go back. And it says, Psalms 49:4, I will incline my ear to a parable. I will open my dark sayings upon a harp. And what is the harp? This is this musical tune that's being played. It's the trumpet that's being blown. It's the warning that's sounding out there. This lovely melody that's being taught. And only the elect are going to listen to it. And only the elect will follow along and dance. This is Matthew 11. And I think it's 19, is it? Nope, 16. But whereunto shall I liken this generation? It is like unto children sitting in the markets, which you see Jake out there all the time, and calling unto their fellows. And we're out there in the markets, in the agora, calling unto the rest of the Israelites out there and saying, we have piped unto you and you have not danced. And they're not dancing to the tune of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. It's very few men out there that is really dancing to the tune of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. We have mourned unto you and you have not lamented. So going back here, this is Psalm 78:2. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old. So when you read the scriptures, sometimes things are symbolical, allegorical, parabolic, and that's the case with this situation with the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, to understand that, you have to go back to the origins, which is the book of Daniel 7:7, and we're going to read it. It says, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, the 4th beast. So all of these everything that Daniel saw was equivalent to a particular beast, and he would see horns on it, or he would see this on it, or he would see that on it, and the Lord just told him to write these things down. Now, this is the 4th one of these beasts in his vision. And when you jump down to the 17th verse, it says, these great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. So basically, there's going to be 4 kingdoms that are going to rise out of the earth from that time all the way up until today. All right. And these 4 kingdoms that arose, the portion of the four kingdoms was fulfilled in the BC into the AD era, beginning with the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And then the Roman Empire fell, and then it came back into power later on during what's called the Renaissance, after 1,000 years of it falling. You see, and in order for you to really understand that or understand this, you have to, be inspired first and foremost by Yahweh Bashim Yahushai and have the right teachers to teach you this. All right. So we're reading here that these beasts represent kings, and in this case represents kingdoms. All right. So when you jump back up to the 7th verse, after this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a fourth beast. So who is this beast? This beast here represents the Roman Empire. And any so-called scholar out there with their head screwed on correctly understands that biblically and historically, this is speaking about the ancient Roman Empire. It says dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly. And when you go to the book of First Maccabees, I believe it's the 8th chapter, it speaks about the might of the Romans and how they came in and how they waged wars against certain nations, and certain nations they would have a league with. It spoke about their might and their power. So this is speaking about the Roman Empire. It says, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. Now teeth represent power. Okay, and iron is one of the strongest metals out there. And this is why when you go back into the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had about that statue, the last part of that statue had what? Legs of iron, part clay. The toes are part iron, part clay. And it started off with gold. Between gold and iron is stronger than gold, even though gold is more precious, but iron is stronger. And these different empires, as they continued on, went from opulence, from great opulence or great riches, down to the strength of iron. They were kind of ragtag, so to speak, but they were stronger, militarily than all those other beasts before them. And that's why it gave the different metals. First it gave the gold, then it gave the silver, then it gave the copper, and then it gave the iron. All right. So we're at the part now of that statue of the 10 toes, part iron, part clay. This is the part that we're at. We're at the very end of that empire. So they devoured and break in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. Why? Because they were Romanizing everything. The Pax Romanus, they were subjugating everyone in their path. And they had what was known as the known world back then. And it was diverse, meaning it was different from all the beasts that were before it. So now how was it diverse, or how was it different from the beasts before it? Well, when you go back into those empires, the Assyrian Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Greek Empire, they all ruled by what? Succession of kings. Different kings sat on the throne. They would have sons, and their sons would sit on the throne, so on and so forth. And that's how the kingdoms were ruled. When the Roman Empire came into being, they had a Senate house, and they had a voting, they had a selection or an election to pick one man to be able to run that empire. Okay, and as they ran that empire, either they were assassinated or their term was up, then you would have another so-called president that will come up, in their stead. All right, and that's how they ruled the kingdom. They didn't rule it as the other ones did, and this is the reason why they were diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. Now these 10 horns represent something. So now let's stop here and let's shuffle over to the book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. Now remember, this back here was during the time of Daniel. This happened. This had to be 600-700 BC, somewhere around there, if I'm not mistaken on the time. And this in Revelation, you're talking about 90 to 100 BC, somewhere in that time, around 96 BC, should I say? So this was about a good 700 to 800 years in the future. And back here, the 10 horns weren't really fully explained, but the beasts were explained. I mean, they went into it a little bit in here, but this one in Revelation kind of goes into it even more. It says Revelation 17:9, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains, and mountains represent governments in the scriptures in certain cases. It's not talking about actual mountains, because some people try to say that the beast is the Vatican because they sit on 7 hills. No, it's not talking about literal mountains. It's talking about governments. So it says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And who is the woman? The woman is a harlot, and that harlot is who? The America. Why? Because America is the one that is controlling all of these nations and pulling them away from their ancient customs of their forefathers. And when you jump down to the 18th verse, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. And when you check out America, America is in everybody's business, and they run everything. And all these nations give heed to America. They have the final word and the final say. And this is a part of the reason why they're getting upset and tired of this bitch, and this is why they're plotting and planning to take her ass out. So her own allies are going to take her out. All right, now let's go back to Daniel. All right. It says, and it had 10 horns. So now we understand that these 10 horns are 10 mountains. Now, these 10 horns today represent the common market, or the European Union, which used to be the European Economic Community back in the treaty, or the I forget what the other part of it was called. I forget what the other part of it was called, but it was March of 1957 when they put it together, and it wasn't ratified or put into law, made official, January of 1958. And this is when the EU was set up into power. And you have the EU nations here. It was 6 member nations at first, back in 1957, 58. Then eventually they started adding more, So the actual 10 is Belgium, Denmark, France, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Greece, Ireland, England, West Germany. This was the original 10. All right. And when you go back into the ancient world, they had different names, such as the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Suevi, the Burgundians, the Saxons, the Franks, the Lombards, so forth and so on. And that was their ancient names. And those ancient European nations were in league with the Roman Empire. And these modern day European nations are in league with America, which is the modern day Roman Empire, or the head of the Roman Empire. All right. And then you also have something called NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That represents the beast, NATO and the EU. Okay. So let's go from there. Let's go to back to Daniel 7 and 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. See, in order for you to understand this, you have to understand what this beast here is. This 4th beast is the Roman Empire. Matter of fact, let's go to Daniel. I'm sorry, not Daniel. 2nd Ezra 12 and 10. This is Ezra writing the vision that the Lord gave him. And he said unto me, this is the interpretation of the vision. The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel. And when you read the 11th chapter of this book and the 12th chapter, it's speaking about the Roman Empire, the ancient Roman Empire. Okay, so this is more proof that that fourth beast is the Roman Empire, beyond the shadow of a doubt. So when you go back here, it says, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. So you had 10 horns, right? And then you had a little horn that came up in the midst of them. And who was that little horn that came up in the midst of them? America. America is that horn, because the horn represents power. This is the power, the superpower that would emerge out of those European nations, which came out of England, and would become the superpower of the world as you see it today. Matter of fact, going back to Revelation 17, let's go up to let me see if I could find the verse. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. So it goes, Revelation 17:9 again. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So if there's 7 kings, right, and the 7 kings are, we got them here. You have the Greeks, you have the British, you have Germania Major, Germania Minor, you have the French, and you have the Spanish, right? Let me see. Greeks, Germania Major, 2, Germania Minor or Major, 3, French, 4, Spain, 5. These are the 5 that fell during a time when the Apostle John saw this vision, right? It says, and the one that was the Roman Empire. Because that was at the time of the vision, the Roman Empire was still in power. And then the one that was going to come later was the British, because they became a superpower later. All right, so let's go back. It says, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. So we had the Greeks that fell. You had the Spanish. You had the French, Germania Major and Germania Minor. They had fallen. And 1 is, which was what? The Roman Empire. And the other is not yet come, which is who? Britain. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space, because they'll continue for a little while. And then America came and took over. Even though behind the scenes they're still running things, but as a major superpower, America has taken the place of England. This is why the American dollar, or the FRN, replaced the British pound as a world currency back in the 40s. All right, it says, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th. So the 8th is America, and is of the 7, because America came out of these 7 European countries, namely France. So it came of the 7 and goeth into perdition, because America is destined to be destroyed. So as greater empire as America is, and as it came up and did all that it did, the Most High set them up that way, because eventually America was going to be made an example of what it is to be wicked, and the payment for being wicked. Salakia. All right, so now let's go back to Daniel and 7 and 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, which is America, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Now, these 3 horns that were plucked up by the roots was the British Empire, the French, and the Spanish, because those are the 3 empires that pretty much had the major hold and the major rule over here in the Americas. You had others, but those are the 3 main ones. That's why you had the I believe it was the War of Independence. Then you had the Spanish-American War and the French-American War. And those are the 3 that were plucked up by the roots. It says, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things, because ever since America took over, they pretty much been blaspheming the Most High. You know, they've been blaspheming the world. They have total control of the whole world. They have control of documents and records, you know, of history going all the way back to the beginning. And when you go to the Library of Congress, the Library of Congress only has about 5,000, almost 6,000 years of the history of man. This is why the historian Eustace Mullins, when they asked him how far back does your research go, he said about 5,000 years. So it's almost in the 6,000 now. You know, it's 5,000 plus, so almost 6,000 years. So that's as far back as the history of a man really goes back to, you know, back to the beginning during the time of Adam and the Adamites and all of that. And these devils know that, but they push that BS that the earth is millions of years old and billions of years old and all that crap, because that way they can keep the lie going. Because there's no way in hell people are going to be able to go back that far to check out if what this devil said is true or not. That's why the Apostle Paul told Timothy to be careful of those science falsely so-called, you know, because it's nothing but a bunch of nonsense. All right. So now that we got that, I mean, we could keep on here, but what I want to go back to the book of Revelation. Now let's go to Revelation 12:1. All right. So now we're starting to get some understanding that fourth beast is the Roman Empire, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. And we understand that America came out of that union, you know, when you do the history, because where else did America come out of? Did America come out of Australia? Did it come out from what's the Atlantic? You know, did it come from Nibiru? You know, where did it come from? It came from those Europeans, you know, out of that whole union that they had back then. This is where America came out of. All right. So this is Revelation 12:1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun. And this is not speaking about Mary. This is speaking about the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And the sun represents wisdom, and the moon represents understanding under her feet, because she had the understanding under her feet, because the nation of Israel are the only ones that have the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the scriptures, because that was what was given to us. And the Most High, that's what made us or makes us holy, you know, saints. It says, and upon her head, a crown of 12 stars, which represents the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And that's proof that it's talking about the 12 tribes and not Mary. It says, and she being with child cried, because Israel back then, during the time of the Roman Empire, were being persecuted by the Roman Empire. Matter of fact, I believe it's this one here. Is it Matthew 11? Yeah, Matthew 11:11. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there has not risen a greater than John the Baptist. It's Yahweh Shai speaking. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. So Jake was catching hell back then from the Romans. This is why you had so many revolts. You're not going to revolt against someone if you get in a fair shake. So they were revolting against the ancient Roman Empire, because the ancient Roman Empire was like the scriptures say, they had iron teeth. They stamped the residue with the feet of it, you know. So Jake was catching hell under the Roman Empire. So this scripture we read here in Revelation 12 was Israel crying out to the Lord, you know, being in the like birth pains, waiting for the salvation to come, which is the salvation of Israel. And this is why the old man Simeon, he went to the temple and he saw the baby Yahushua when he was a baby, and he held him up to heaven. And he said, now that you can let thy servant die in peace, for I have seen the consolation of Israel. All right. It says travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. Why? Because they were catching hell under the Romans, even under them wicked Pharisees, under the Herodians and all of that, you know. It says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. So this great red dragon represents NATO and the EU today, But back then, this well, really it represented the Roman Empire back then, the great red dragon, because this was the beast that was at that time. Because remember, it had 7 heads and 10 horns, and this was the only one that was really ruling at that time, because everybody else was subjugated under him. Remember, it said 5 have fallen and 1 is, and the other is not yet coming. When he cometh, he continue for a short space. It said having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. So this represented the Roman Empire, but it also represented all of the beast. In today's term, you would say the NATO and the EU. Back then, they didn't have the term NATO or EU. They just had European nations together that were in league with the Roman Empire. It said his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven. Now the stars of heaven are who? The Israelites. You can go back to Genesis during the dream that Joseph had, which shows that his brothers were known as the 11 stars. You can go into different scriptures where it speaks about Israel shining as stars, like in Daniel the 12th chapter and others. It says, and did cast them to the earth, because did not that happen in 70 AD? And even prior to that, did not Herod and them, did not he send out a great persecution against the children, the male children from 2 years and under, that actually put hell on mainly the tribe of Benjamin, because the scriptures speak about the prophecy was that Rachel would weep for her children because they were not. It says, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And this is why when the wise men came there, they thought that this guy Herod was really real about worshiping Yahushai, and they were about to tell him where the babe was, but they didn't, because the angel came to them and said, don't do it, because he pretty much is going to bring mischief upon the child. And this is why from the time that the wise men came to him, that's why he killed the male children from 2 years and under, because that was a time frame that these children or that the wise men were there to see him and wanted to go see Yahushua, and never came back to tell him what happened. It says that she brought forth a man child, which is Yahushua, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto the Most High, into his throne, because eventually Yahushua was crucified. All right. It says, and the woman fled into the wilderness, because after they went through this persecution and Yahushua went back to the Father, what happened? 70 AD came along. Let's go from there to Luke 21 and 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword. When did this happen? This happened during the time of 70 AD. And they shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And this happened during the time of the Roman Empire at 70 AD, beginning roughly around 66 AD and going all the way up to about 74 AD. But the key year that this happened was 70 AD. And this is why in 70 AD, Yahushua said, when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, he that is in the field, let him not come back to get his stuff, for these be the days of vengeance. That's what the Lord told him. So it says, and the woman fled into the wilderness. So you had certain Israelites that went into the wilderness. Now the wilderness represented over there in interiors of Africa, because you had a lot of Israelites, a lot of Israelite communities in there. Then you had some of them fled different ways, because it said that they would be scattered into all nations. So they went different. Some of them went north, some of them went east, and some of them went south down into the interiors of Africa. It says, well, she had the place prepared of the Most High. And this place that was prepared of the Most High was America, because the Lord at this time had brought the majority of the Latin tribes or the Northern Kingdom over to the so-called Americas. And there had to be a time where the Southern Kingdom had to be joined back together with the Northern Kingdom, because Judah is the head tribe, to build back up the nation of Israel as you see it today. and it was the so-called Negroes, and then you had Benjamin, which is a so-called West Indians, Levi, the so-called Haitians, and you had some so-called Puerto Ricans back then that were coming around. Some of the Latin tribes are coming around, But now you see an influx of all the tribes because we're at the time of the end. So the place that was prepared of the Most High for was what? America. That they should feed her their 1,203 score days, and there a certain period of time here in America where Jake was actually here, and catching hell and under this devil until the time when the Lord freed Jacob and also allowed, beginning with Eldar Bivens and other men back then that were teaching about Israel, and that's when the truth started to spring to life. All right, so now I'm going to jump from here because we could read on down, but I'm going to jump to the 13th chapter. Or do I have it here? Nope. Jump from there to the 13th chapter. Let's go next chapter. And before we read on here, I got this here because remember we read about the matter of fact. Let me read the first verse, Revelation 13:1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. He saw an actual beast, but this actual beast represented 7 major empires of the so-called white man with their allies, so-called European allies, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, let's go to Satan's Angels Exposed, right? This is a PDF I found online a couple of days ago. I'll put the description in the description box in case any brothers want to get it. This is chapter 28, the Common Market and the Trilateral Commission. And this is on page 227. All right. Now, I'm going to read some of this. It says, many of the goals of the trilateralists being fulfilled through the common market of Europe. It is possible that in our lifetime, we will see much progress towards a universal government system and a new world financial order that will control all buying and selling. And that's what's happening right now. And this is why you have what's known as the market of beast, which is a microchip, which is their goal. Because that can centralize everything, and they like to centralize everything. They don't like things to be independent, and this is why they bring in central governments or central banks to merge everything together. All right, it says it is possible that Antichrist is living today, in which these people they go off. They have certain information, but then on certain other parts of the scriptures they go off because there are many Antichrists. And it tells you that in the book of 1 John, the 2nd chapter. And no matter how many times you bring it out, they're still talking about the Antichrist, the one guy that's going to be the Antichrist. Is it Obama? Is it Trump? Is it, No, there's many Antichrists. It says, waiting for conditions to be right for the entrance into the world scene. Antichrist will rule over the revived Roman Empire. And today, America and the EU is the revived Roman Empire. Western and possibly part of Eastern Europe. It says the common market is now comprised of 10 nations. See, Rome first appeared as a world power in 242 BC in the conquest of Sicily. For the next 300 years, Rome's influence moved southward to Israel and Egypt. And when you come down here, you scroll here, this is Brussels, Belgium. This is in Belgium, Brussels. And this is the headquarters for the European or the common market. Back then it was called the EEC, the European Economic Community. And you see it's like in a form of a peace symbol, which is really the upside down broken cross. All right. And it says you are looking at the common market headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. Antichrist quite possibly could become the head of the Union of 10 Nations. Turn this page, you will note this building is shaped in the form of a stylized cross, which is an upside down cross. So we read up here, Israel and Egypt, eastward to conquer most of the Grecian Empire, westward to Spain, and northward to England, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump down to here. Although the Roman Empire was broken, as prophesied by Daniel chapter 2, the empire would continue to rule until the time of the end. The major wars from 1000 AD to the present time have been wars involving Roman Empire nations. David Weber, editor of Gospel Truth, observed in 1957. This is when the European Economic Community got their charter. That's what it was. The word is charter. But they didn't become official until January 1st, 1958. It says in 1957, 6 nations joined together in a trade agreement called the European Economic Community as the Common Market. When the headquarters for the Common Market was erected in Brussels, Belgium, which we just saw, 10 flagpoles for the flags of 10 nations were erected in front of the building. This was in accordance with Bible prophecy, and that is true. But what happened was, I don't know if they realized it, or because back then you had the high priest, the high priests out there, the King Masha and the high priest Ariah and high priest Yaquab and the other high priests and elders teaching. So I don't know if once they noticed that they started changing, but this goes back to Salaki. This goes back to 73. So they were out there teaching, but they weren't teaching on the high frequency that they were going further up, into like the 80s and the 90s. But it was always fire, but it was just gradually growing. So back in 73, you had high priest Ariah and King Masha, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lahab and Yeshaya came in around 75 or so, 1975, so on and so forth, So the men of the Lord were out there. So I don't know if eventually they realized that they had 10 flagpoles up there and they had to change that because they were fulfilling prophecy unknowingly. See, it says the six charter members were Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Italy, West Germany, and Luxembourg. So you had 6. Then later on, you had England, Denmark, different nations that were added to it. But then when you look at some of these nations, some of them are like Spain and Portugal. That's the same massive land. So that counts as one. But what they did, they tried to break it up because eventually it was like 12. But really, if you look at them, they were really 10. Because you have the UK comprises of England, comprises of England, Scotland, and Ireland, if I'm not mistaken. But they try to separate England and Scotland as 2 different ones, but they're the same thing. All right. So let's go back. Oh no, you know what? Let's go here now. Now I just typed in 10 nations or market, or 10 nations, or the Roman Empire 10 nations union, or something like that. I forget what I typed in, and this came up, and this guy was kind of getting down a little bit. He has the 10. He doesn't have the perfect 10, but he was kind of close. It says Bible prophecy foretells a 10-nation military alliance that will rise out of a revived Roman Empire. See, and now today, everybody, they have these people out here that are experts at it, because for a long time we've been breaking this down. And then you had certain of them different Edomites out there and stuff that were teaching certain things that actually were hitting on certain prophecies, because they were historians. They knew about the certain histories of the Greeks and the Romans and all that, and they understood that according to biblical prophecy, you would have these different nations that were ruled. So they had some of it right, but they just didn't have the full picture. It said the revived Roman Empire, the European Union, and the European Union, and will come under the control of the Antichrist, which they're going off on that. Unknown to many Christians, a 10-nation military alliance appeared in Europe in 1995. It appeared before that. They're calling it the Western European Union. But it goes before that. It goes back to 1958. That's when that alliance was really set up. And then eventually, as they moved up, up in the years, you had more members added to that when you look up the history on the European Union. All right, these 10 nations are members of both NATO and the European Union, and that's true. This is why Elder Apostle Tar always says that the beast is NATO and the EU together, because they're some of the same nations that are in the European Union are in NATO. Said what bound them together was a mutual defense obligation under Article 5 of the modified Brussels Treaty, which meant that an attack against one would be an attack against all. To learn why this alliance held interest to students of prophecy, read our overview. It says, yet on March 31st, 2010, the 10 nations announced that they had agreed to terminate their alliance, blah, 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 you know, whatever. It says the 10 nations that made up the alliance were Belgium, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, United Kingdom. Now we had the 10 here, which we have here Denmark. They don't have Denmark there, you know. But I mean, they're close because they have what's known as actual European nations, you know. And you had, but they understand that there was going to be a 10 member nation of these nations that were going to make up the 10 horns in the book of Revelation and in the book of Daniel. All right. And then what happened is they kept adding more nations because to upset prophecy, or try to upset prophecy. All right. Let's see if there's anything else here. That's pretty much it on that. So you brothers, you know, I put this in the description box. You could check it out. But you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's some bones in here. So if you're not really ready for it, I wouldn't suggest it. You know, brothers out there that can eat meat, so to speak, just make sure you spit the bones out. All right. So that is the 10 nations. And like I said, you have in the ancient Roman Empire, you had those same nations, but they had ancient names back then. All right. And we mentioned some of it, like the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, you know, so on and so forth. Now, coming back to Revelation 13:1, it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his head 10 crowns. So now we understand that the 7 heads represent the Greeks, the French, the Romans, the Spanish, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and Britain. And then out of that came out America, which was the 8th out of the 7. All right. And then they had alliances with each other because you had the 10 horns, which were actually 10 of those European nations that were conglomerate or in league with the ancient Roman Empire. All right. Having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy, because they ruled. And the blasphemy part is because they're saying that they're the Most High, that they're Yahushai, that they're the angels. You know, it says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. Now, when you go back to the book of Daniel, the 7th chapter, it starts, the first leopard that it starts with is, the first beast that it starts off with was that lion, you know, that had the wings clipped off. You know, matter of fact, let's go there real quick. Daniel 7:3. And 4 beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion and that had eagle's wings. I beheld to the wings were plucked off, to the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. All right. So that lion that was standing up with the wings, that first part represented the Assyrian Empire, but the Babylonian Empire came in and subdued them and took over, and it became the Assyrio-Babylonian Empire. It says, in another beast, a second like unto a bear. Then it went into the bear, and then it went into the leopard, and then it went into the 4th beast. So what we're reading in Revelation is the beginning of the beast, which was the leopard, because the beast, the Greeks, you know, these devils always brag about how civilization began with the Greeks. So it started with the Greeks, right? It says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. It started with the leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear. Now today, the bear represents Russia, because the beginning of the beast, it started with the Greeks, and it's going to end with the Russians, even though the Russians were not a part of that 7 heads and 10 horns. You know, the Russians are the ones that's going to bring an end to this American empire, you know, along with their allies too. It says, so he gave you the beginning and the end, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, because the lion, or the mouth of a lion, represents England, because they're the ones behind the scenes that are really running things, even though America is at the forefront. But the policies that are being pushed out here are the policies of who? The Rothschilds. You know, that's why the patriarch, or the one Meyer Amschel Bauer, he said, "Give me control over nation's money, and I care not who make the laws." It says, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death. Now this head was what? The Roman Empire. Because when the Apostle John was writing this, it was in the midst of the Roman Empire. They were still in power. Even though they were losing their power, you know, you had Jake coming up in there. But by this time, they were on a decline. You know, you had Jake that was getting up in there in different time periods. Because it used to be taught that Septimius Severus in 193 AD took over and brought down the Roman Empire, but it happened before that. You know, it was happening before that, because Jake was all up in there. All right. So it says, and his deadly wound was healed. Now, when was the deadly wound healed? The deadly wound was healed during the time of the Renaissance period. And depending on what information you get, spare me 1 second, brothers. The Renaissance period started roughly in the 1300s into the 1400s. And that's around the time when Esau started getting back into power. This is when the deadly wound was being healed, during the time of what is known as the Renaissance period. You know, and this is why the word Renaissance, which is a French word which means rebirth, was the rebirth or the re-beginnings of Esau getting back into power, because the prophecy stated that they would be incarcerated or put in prison, so to speak, for a period of 1,000 years. And they represent the devil. They represent Satan. All right. And his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. All right. And they worshiped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, because they're worshiping this American system, which really goes back all the way back to the Roman Empire. You know, and the Roman Empire and the American Empire both worship Satan. So when you're upholding this kingdom and you're riding for this kingdom, so to speak, you're pretty much worshiping Satan. It says, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who was able to make war with him? Because nobody, you ask any American here about war and about any nation trying to come against America, they said they'll wipe them out in 3 days. They'll wipe them out in a week, or they'll wipe them out in a month, because that's the mentality of the average American out there. You know, that they've took lands and countries from many different people, and they have this big, great military, and they think that they never will be able to be taken down from that authority. But they're sadly mistaken. Yep, they're proud. That's right. That's right. They're proud. All right. So, yep, the brother, 2 witnesses, Revelation 17:13. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. And this is what's happening right now. They're slowly but surely turning away from America, and they're building a union more so amongst themselves. You know, so all these allies of America, this European Union, is going to link up with NATO, because some of them are already linked up with NATO, and they're going to come against America and destroy this place. All right. So this is the beast. All right. So now let's go from there, and let's go back to Revelation 17, since the brother put that up. And let's go to the 12th verse. says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the 10 horns at one point really weren't an issue until they made this league or this union, which happened back in 1958. It says, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And when you do the math on this, it was like 41.6 years. So this hour was up like around 1998, you know, somewhere around there. 1999, I forget the exact. We had calculated it, you know, but they're still in power, but they're in their waning years. It says, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, because eventually these same European nations that are allied with America are going to turn against America and shoot missiles upon America. It says, these shall make war with the Lamb, because they're going to be fighting against each other when Yahushua comes back, and it was known as, or was called, World War III. So then they're going to turn their attention from fighting against one another to fighting against Yahushua. It says, and the Lamb shall overcome them. And this right here is another cut to Revelation 12, where it says that Michael fought and his angels and Satan fought and his angels. This is what it's talking about. These different militaries fighting against the Lord Yahushua when he comes back. It says, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And what is that? That's what you call the so-called melting pot. Because you read up here in the first verse, and there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials and talked with me, saying unto me, come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And you jump down to the 15th verse, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the horse sitteth are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And America is that melting pot. And this is this is why they painted that golden city, you know, a scenario to people so that they can all come over here. But that was the Lord doing that, you know, so all these people could come here to fulfill this prophecy. You know, I don't think there's one nation out there in the world that is not here in America. I could be wrong, but I think that all nations on the planet Earth have some, you know, some people here, whether it's 10 people or 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000, you know. So America is that great melting pot. It says, in the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, which is the European Union, these shall hate the whore, because they're starting to get aggravated with this bitch. Because ever since any nation that ever let America step foot on the soils of their land, you know, they destroyed the economy. They've destroyed the morality. They've destroyed, you know, their way of life. You know, they've destroyed everything. So these nations are fed up, and they want to do something, but they know they got to do it collectively, because they can't do it one by one, because America is still a force to be reckoned with. And this is why the Most High is going to cause all these nations, along with Russia, China, India, and all them different nations, you know, we believe with the missiles, the nuclear missile capability to fire their missiles at this bitch, America. It says, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. See, shall burn her with fire. What fire? The nuclear fire. For the Most High had put in their hearts to fulfill his will. Why? Because the Most High is the one that's in charge. He's the one that's in control of everything that's going on. You know, you have these nations and just people in general that think that they're in control. You ain't in control, man. The Most High is in control. Proverbs 21:1. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of water, he turneth it whithersoever he will. So all nations, every person on the planet, their mind and their ways and the things that they do are all controlled by Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. All right, so now let's go back to Revelation 17:17. For the Most High had put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast. See, so they're going to give their kingdom unto NATO, because right now these different nations, even though they're in league, they have their own set of rules and regulations that they follow. But in that day, they're gonna be like, you know what, man, fuck all this. Let's put our differences aside and let's get this bitch. You know, it says until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled, because the Most High is the one that's working on the minds of these kings to do these things. It says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which is America, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. So the beast that we read in them different chapters is dealing with NATO and the EU. All right. And they're going to come against America, because although America is a part of NATO, these different European nations are tired of this bitch. They're tired of carrying this hoe, you know? And they said that she was carried by a scarlet colored beast. And that scarlet colored beast represents them European nations. They're going to get tired of carrying this bitch, because the Lord is going to put the spirit upon them to do that. You know, so with that, I hope you brothers were edified. I hope, you know, this lesson open up your eyes more, or you know, open up your understanding to the beast, you know, so you could understand a little more about what when you read in Revelation about the beast, who or what it is speaking about, so you can identify who it's speaking of, you know. So with that, say shalom.